Hi everyone, thank you for coming tonight. Tonight is the third public workshop in the Envision Yountville General Plan Update process, and we've been busy working on this project for the last year and a half. We have some ideas we want to share with you tonight and share some of the process and the history that we've been going through and get your feedback before we launch into the next phase. I see members of town staff who are here. We have members of the Zoning and Design Review Board and the Arts Commission. I see members of the town advisory group for the Envision Yountville effort. Could you all raise your hands so everyone knows who you are? These people have been working with us the last 10 months and have provided a lot of feedback for this process, and now we're turning it over to you, the public. And last, I will mention we have some town council members here. They are here to listen. They're not making any decisions. They're just really interested in seeing what the community's levels of interest are. So now I'll introduce the members of our consultant team. We have Kendall Flint here. We have Christina O'Rourke and Peter Wench. And we'll just jump right into our presentation. Thank you again for coming.
Quick question. Before you start, just so we're able to do it, does everybody have a clicker by now? Those of you that have been attending the meetings, you know how important they are. Does anyone not have a clicker? Little clickers. If you don't have a clicker, raise your hand. Okay, we can start.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We're really excited to have you here. This is our third community workshop. And so I'm going to get started with just a little bit of an introduction about why we're here. The Envision Yountville effort is all about updating the general plan. And so a general plan articulates the community's vision for the future. A general plan is usually lasts about 10 to 20 years. The one general plan that Yountville has now is adopted in 1992, so it's definitely time to update the plan. And a general plan is an overarching document that guides the growth and development of a town. Now, what I mean by overarching document, everything else follows from the general plan. So when the town adopts ordinances that go into the municipal code or adopts a capital improvement plan, all of those documents need to be found to be consistent with the general plan. And also, our decision makers, our council, our boards, our commissioners, and staff uses the general plan when they're looking at new development, to approve new development, to make sure that development is also consistent with the general plan. So it's really important to make sure we get this right. The general plan is, a lot of it's about achieving balance, and sometimes it's about achieving balance between some competing interests. So, for example, we want our general plan to be visionary, like I was just talking about. We're looking into the future, we're looking into 20 years from now. What do we want our community to look like? How do we want it to feel? How do we want it to work for us? But at the same time, the general plan has to be practical. It has to have policies in it and programs in it that really are achievable over the life of the general plan. Our general plan needs to provide clear direction to our decision makers so they really can use it. It's a practical document and they can apply it to a wide variety of development proposals. But it also needs to be flexible because things change over time. So the language has to be broad enough so that it can be applied in a lot of different situations and it can still be valid as things change. Our general plan is going to guide new development. There will be some growth for the town, but at the same time, we want to preserve the community character. We hear this a lot. We have a beautiful town here. It's got the environment and the views and the architectural heritage. Those are all things, a small town character. We want to preserve all of those things. So how do we balance that? How do we keep the things we love about Yountville while still making some room for some new growth? And then finally, we want a plan that's going to maintain fiscal sustainability. Yountville's in the enviable position of having it's really well run and has very good fiscal health. And a lot of that comes from the revenues that are generated from the businesses here in the tourism industry. But at the same time, so we need the tourist industry here, but we also want to protect the quality of life for the residents. We want to keep the peace and quiet, the beauty, the tranquility and the charm of Yountville. So we're trying to achieve all of this with our update of our general plan. This is the 5th revision of the general plan. The very first one was adopted in 1966 when the town was incorporated. And at that time, there actually weren't that many fewer people than there are now. There was about 2,600 of the population in Yountville. 2,000 of those people were at the Veterans Home. Right now we're down to about 930 at the Veterans Home. So at least it shifted that way. At that time, it was envisioned that Yountville was going to grow much further beyond its borders, and that eventually, actually it thought in 20 years in the future then, it would be a town of 30,000 people. But that hasn't come to pass, and that's a lot of that's because of the agricultural preserve that's protecting all of the agricultural land now around Yountville. Just 9 years later, the next general plan was adopted, and even by that time, the people who were living here were beginning to feel like the rural character of the town was starting to erode, so they embodied goals that was going to preserve the small town character, the scale, the pace of life of Yountville in that general plan. 10 years after that, another general plan was adopted. At that time, half of the land in town was either a vineyard, an orchard, or undeveloped, so there was still lots of potential for growth. But even then, the residents really wanted to kind of limit commercial development, so that was part of that general plan. And then in 1992, by 1992, there was a lot of the new residential developments had been built, and they were planned developments. They were like what you see around Oak Circle, for example, kind of these cul-de-sacs and development that's very much kind of kept into itself and not very well integrated into the fabric of the town. So one of the big things in this general plan was that they said they wanted to go back to the old way of developing, kind of a lot by lot on a grid that was really well integrated with the town. They also wanted to make sure to avoid having kind of a visitor commercial strip down Washington Street and kind of preserve the character of the town with lots of gathering spaces and little courtyards and that sort of thing. So the 1992 plan, actually even in 1992, it identified 70 acres of land that were still available for future development. And those are all in those gray areas there, and I'm checking off the things that have been developed. So there's the residential areas to the north were developed. That's Washington Park, Vineyard Oaks were developed. And then some of the big commercial sites were also developed. Bardesano, Villaggio, the Yountville Hotel were all developed since 1992. The only two sites that are still left that were not developed are the one to the north, which is the French Laundry Garden site. That site is zoned primary commercial, and it also has an affordable housing overlay on that site, which means that the developer, the property owner, could elect to also have affordable housing there. We think at this point it looks like there will not be any housing on that site, and it will be developed, I believe it's for lodging. The other site is to the south. That is a mixed residential site. It's zoned for mixed residential use already, and that's the site where the Catholic Church is. This site is a little difficult to develop because it's in a floodplain. So if the site was to be fully developed with mixed residential, and what that means is a balance between single family and multifamily homes, it will most likely need a flood wall to protect that site area in order to have development there. So that's what's left here. So our goals for our update, we started this process almost 2 years ago now, and at the beginning we knew there were a few things that we really wanted to accomplish. One, we wanted to have a concise, easy to read and attractive document, and that's because we want this to be a very accessible document that people will pick up, they'll be able to understand it, and they'll have a real sense of what Yountville is, what the community's like, what the community wants in terms of new development, and so it's a useful document. The other thing we wanted to do was start with the 1992 plan and then update the goals and policies and programs that are in that plan. And this is something that we've done. We've spent a lot of time with the Town Advisory Group, which is a group that was appointed by the Town Council to help guide this process of updating the plan. We have 9 members with 2 alternates. And what we did was every month when we met, we would pick an element from the previous plan and go through the policies one by one and decide, well, is this policy still useful? Has this been implemented? Is it no longer relevant? Should we keep it? Should we modify it? So we've gone through that whole process at this point. We wanted to be sure that we were going to address potential housing, infill, and change areas, and that's a lot about why you're here tonight. We did look at this in our second workshop, which was in November. We started kind of exploring ideas about some of the areas where there's vacant land, where there's underutilized land, and what we might want to see change there, what new development might fit into those areas. So we wanted to be sure that we addressed that in this update. And then finally, and probably most important, we really want to create a plan that expresses the values and the vision of the community. So there are 7 required elements of a general plan, and by required I mean that the state requires these elements. And an element, you can think of it as kind of as a topic area. Sometimes they're individual chapters, sometimes we combine them in one chapter. But those are the 7 required elements. We have to address land use, circulation, safety, noise, open space, and conservation. The state also says that a community can have additional optional elements if they so choose. We are looking at adding additional chapters on quality of life, and by that we mean the quality of life of residents, arts and culture, historic resources, and economic sustainability. And then finally, we're going to have a sustainability theme that kind of connects and weaves its way through all of the elements, because there's so many things that are, you'll find things about sustainability in the circulation element and in the housing element and the conservation element. So we're going to weave that theme through the draft general plan. So again, we've been at this for a long time at this point. We started off last year around this, I think it was in January last year, with 5 speaker series presentations. I think a lot of you may have attended some of those. They covered a variety of subjects. We've also had 2 community workshops last fall. The first one was to kind of identify major issues and areas of concern, get kind of a feeling from the community about what we should be addressing in the general plan. The second one we had in November, and that's what I was talking about before. We were really starting to look at some land use issues. We've met with the Zoning and Design Review Board, with the Parks and Rec Commission. We've had 2 study sessions with the council. We also yesterday had a special meeting with the Veterans Home, and we also had a special meeting with the business community last night. And here we are tonight with our 3rd community workshop. There's going to be a lot more to go through this process. Once we have our draft general plan, we're still going to have lots of public meetings and a lot more ways for the community to give us more input. So one thing that's kind of come out of all of these meetings and all of this public feedback that we've gotten at this point is what they call in a business community a SWOT analysis. So we've been able to identify Yountville's strengths and Yountville's weaknesses. We've also identified challenges. And what we're doing now is looking at what kind of opportunities do we have, especially through our land use choices, to capitalize on those strengths and to address the weaknesses and meet those challenges head on. So the strengths, and a lot of these is what we've talked about in those previous workshops and in the speaker series, and this is, we kind of wanted to distill this down for you. The strengths, one of the biggest things that everyone has said, that it's the people in Yountville, and people are really friendly here. That leads not only to a real sense of community, but people are really friendly to the visitors. We heard that so the visitors like want to come back, and they come back again and again because they just really enjoy interacting with the residents here in town. It's a beautiful town, small town charm. It's a very walkable community. It's got this gorgeous views of the hills all around it. The agrarian heritage is really important, and the historic buildings. And consistently, when we've done surveys, the residents rate the quality of life here is either good to excellent. So these are all things that are really, they're strengths of Yountville, things that we want to preserve. Some more strengths: it's a world-renowned destination for food, for wine, for lodging. That leads to a very strong economy, of course. And because of all that tax revenue, you can afford to have great art and culture programs and community events and programs. I know you have Sip and Stroll coming up this weekend. What beautifully well-maintained parks and facilities, is a safe community, it's a quiet community, and again, the government is financially stable. So these are all strengths that we want to preserve and enhance through the general plan. We've also identified some weaknesses. One, the high cost of housing. It's really expensive to live here, not just here. Lots of places in the Bay Area are very expensive. But the lack of affordable housing leads to sometimes not a lot of diversity in your demography. It also can make it difficult to get workers here, to have the employees to come and work, especially in lower paying service type of jobs. So it can be hard to attract and retain employees. There's a heavy reliance on tourism, and as we know, like when the fires happened, that just a little momentary dip in the economy can lead to a reduction in tax revenues, and just impacts the economy. A lack of residents serving retail and services. We've heard loud and clear, lots of the residents have to go down to Napa to get your food or to go to the doctor. An overrepresentation of restaurants, wine tasting rooms, and lodging. And also that kind of leads to a potential friction between commercial and residential uses. And by friction, I'm talking about issues like parking and noise and light. And again, the lack of demographic diversity. So the challenges that your town is facing: one is a proliferation of second homes. There's not a lot that we can do about that, but one of the things that we are keeping in the general plan is the policy that a home or a second unit can't be rented for less than 30 days. So no short-term rentals. That's one way of trying to control the Airbnb-ization of a town. We have state housing mandates for new and affordable housing. We're going to be talking about this a little bit later, but this just becomes an issue because the town every 8 years is forced to identify places for new housing. Where can we fit new housing that's affordable to a lot of different income levels? The aging of the population. As we get older, we have fewer families here. It's hard to keep that Yountville Elementary School going as well. And again, I've already mentioned the shortage of the employee base. So what are the opportunities? We're looking at ways, at least tonight, we're looking at ways that we can use our land to try to address those challenges, and the weaknesses, and while building on our strengths. So we're looking at vacant land, and tonight we're going to be looking at what we call the North Agricultural Parcel, and also the Humboldt properties. This is a new one. We did look at the North Agricultural Parcel in that second workshop, so we wanted to bring some ideas back to you and get a little bit more feedback. We also have an opportunity to kind of tweak our development standards, and what that is, it's like the height of buildings. It's something we call floor area ratio, how large a building is, how much a percentage the building can occupy on a site of land. So there's some ways to kind of tweak those so that we might get some more of the kinds of development that we want, the kinds of uses we want. And then there's also Veterans Home. Veterans Home has, they adopted a new master plan in 2012. They're working on an update of that plan. There are opportunities for example, for more housing, workforce housing, employee housing at Veterans Home. So that is another opportunity that we're going to explore tonight. So the first thing we're going to do is look at commercial areas. And I'm going to now pass it over to Kendall. We're going to all kind of tag team on this presentation tonight. And take it away, Kendall.
Thank you, my dear. We're going to be asking you a series of questions tonight. And for those of you that are not familiar with the little clickers, everybody hold one up so I know you have it. If you don't have a clicker, wave your hand furiously so we can get you one. We're missing a clicker up here. Our clicker patrol is coming in. These allow us to just capture an opinion that's in the room tonight. All these questions we're going to be asking, we'll be asking again online. So you'll have an opportunity to weigh in later or ask friends to do it as well. The first of these questions, again, these are very general, but what we're really asking just in general with the town of Yountville, which of these would you like to see more of? Number one would be non-food or retail. Non-food or wine retail, something other than that, clothing, what have you. 2, more services. That could be hair salons, accountants, anything that is not related to wine. 3, offices, any type of business that would operate here in the community. 4, upper floor residential. That could be apartments or condos. A lot of you might have heard this before, is thinking of mixed use, where you might have a business on the downstairs floor and some sort of living space above. 5, more gathering places. Places where people can come, have a cup of coffee, talk to friends, walk their dogs, whatnot. 6, other. Now in this particular question, you can push as many of these as you think you'd like to see more of. So there are 6 options, 1 through 6. You can push them in any order. If there's one that you like more than the other, don't bother pushing it 6 times. It only counts once. So just pick the ones that you would like to see here in the town of Yountville. And once we've had a chance to see everybody click in on that, oh, you're good at this. You've done this before. Some of you have. Okay. Okay, what do we want to see more of other than wine? Number 1. We also found this in the 2 community surveys that we saw previously. I'm curious, though, for those of you that said other, and we have a couple mics floating around the room, and Peter, I might call you into action on this as well. For those that said other, I'm going to start with you, because I think you said you other like none, right? So can you get a mic over to him, Peter?
You know what? I would have marked other too if I would have known that that's where it would have gone.
We'll get to you just a second. You can go ahead.
Yeah, my thought is I like Yountville just fine, and I don't see all these things as progress necessarily. And it might, in light of full disclosure, I'm here representing my family who owns the 33-acre ag preserve.
Okay.
And it kind of distresses me to see that as regarded as vacant land. There's 20,000
We're going to come to
brand new
that.
grapevines on
We're
there.
going to come to that in a bit, and I'm sure you're going to have something to say about that, and we'll look forward to your comment on that. And right here, yes?
Yeah, so I marked because I didn't know what other, I
Other
didn't
could be-
understand
yeah.
other. And I agree with this gentleman. We retired here. We just bought a home here. We like the quality of life here, and I don't think Yountville needs to change. We don't want to become Vacaville. We don't want to become Fairfield. We want to
Sure.
stay Yountville. People can go to Napa. You talk about affordable housing and growth. It is not a long drive for anybody to drive from Napa to Yountville. We came from LA, and the amount, 3 stoplights, really, you guys? Get a grip on reality.
I always like that when people talk about traffic, because it's sort of like there's traffic here, ooh, and then the 405 at any time of the day or night. Just saying. Okay, others, yes, in the back here.
I agree with the other 2 speakers. I'm happy with the town as it is, and I don't see that as a plus or positive for the city or for the town.
Okay, so and I appreciate that comment. I have to point out just that when we do the surveys and when we've asked other folks, regardless, most people the majority of people that have attended the meetings have expressed desires for everything from a Trader Joe's to the ability to have, don't know share, but I'm just saying, the ability to have other types of services. When I say services, resident serving services as opposed to veterans. I'm curious, anybody else feel that way? Yes, in the back there with the greens. Yep. Yeah, well, we want to hear. That's okay, well, you'll come next. Not quite yet, next. We'll have to, yep, in the back first.
I think that this just points out one of the faults of the clicker type of gathering of information. It doesn't actually allow us to have a discussion about what the details of each of these choices are, and I think that most people, if we had a discussion about it, we would be more on the same page than off the page. And I think that the clicker is, although fun, it doesn't actually get us any closer to knowing what we really want.
Well, we're trying to do that at this point with the discussion, so I'd like to hear, what do you really want?
Well, I clicked the first 3 items, but I do agree that we could stop now if some of the wine bars wanted to be services and local serving areas. I don't think we need more buildings particularly, but I have to say that if all the visitor serving businesses left town unexpectedly, this place would still be a beautiful, happy place to be. So that's just my opinion.
All right, and this gentleman up here, forward up and to the left, yeah.
Hi there. So I just wanted to voice my support. I think the comments here are really insightful about the current state of the town. And I would just want to make sure that as these questions are recorded, I mean, the way they're phrased suggests that by answering, we want to see something. So other people have interpreted it as, I don't want it to change, but there isn't a question that says, I don't want it to change. So we just need to make sure if these results are going to be interpreted, passed on, and the context is lost, it's going to look like this is all the development people want, where we've heard 5 or 6 people say, actually, I don't want anything, and there's not a question that says none.
Well, let me do this to make it pretty simple for tonight, because I want to make sure we capture it. How about if I add none to this list and we repoll it? Okay, let me just for tonight, because we can. Modern technology. None. Quick reset. Please excuse the typo, but I'm kind of doing this quickly. So same question. Again, you can pick as many of these as you like, or just the one. Let me pull this, and I'll get to your comment in just 1 second, okay? Okay.
So gathering places,
Mhm.
are those community gathering places, or are they tourist gathering places? It's a little nebulous.
They can be both. So basically, like right here where we sit today, you can go out here and you can play the piano, or you can sit on a bench someplace. That would be a gathering place that was open to the public. Whether you were a resident or a visitor, it would be a gathering place, for context. Yes, sir.
Thank you. The current Yountville general plan commits Yountville to a small-scale character and connection to the surrounding vineyards. And that's the reason that most of us are here, and that's the reason that we became full-time Yountville residents. Now, I don't think that growing that or changing that is progress. I think it's regressive, and we would like to keep it the same character that it is. That's the reason that we're here.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Everyone go ahead and roll in on this one, because we have none on there as well. We have quite a bit to go to tonight, and I can already tell with some of the images we're going to be showing, it's going to be a lively evening. But I want to capture these questions, but I also want to get to the heart of some of this discussion, because clearly there's some differing opinions. Okay, so we have 42 for there. Let's see, just for yucks right now, what we've got. Has everybody felt comfortable rolling in on that? Okay. Wait. Do I get a yes now? Yes. Okay. There are only 12 of these questions, but, here we go. Let me get the answers to this. Okay, so none. We have 35 with none. Okay. It's a new crowd tonight. But that's okay. No, that's good. So none. Just for those of you that said none. Yes, ma'am?
I don't think it's a new crowd. I think it's a more appropriate question. I believe that the town really likes the way this town is.
Mhm.
We just retired here, and we came here because of the character of the town, not because it was going to grow and become something that
Different.
different than what it is. And the city has the ability, for instance, with Restoration Hardware, they have the ability to make these places retail. They don't have to make, these, if you could bring in Restoration Hardware, it has to have a tasting room, and it has to have a wine room, and it has to. It doesn't has to have anything.
Well, and that's a good example of some things we're going to talk about later. It sounds like you're okay with Restoration Hardware. No, I'm not. You don't need any of it.
Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
Restoration Hardware
We're going to get to that, but that's, I don't think, entirely accurate. The idea here is that we're going to be talking about some things tonight that actually incentivize not wine rooms and not that type of tourism-driven thing. I'm going to let Peter move on to this point. We are going to come back to a number of things tonight. I want to make sure there's enough time. Is it something that relates directly to this question right now, or can you, yes? Okay.
Sir?
Yeah.
If we had, I'm a little bit confused on none. If we say none, does that mean we don't want, if a new business comes in, that we don't want the non-food or wine retail business? Does that mean we don't want gathering
Well,
places?
I may be misinterpreting it, but what I heard was none, which means none.
We don't want any of those things.
That's how I
We don't want a
interpreted it.
gathering place, we don't want to, okay, well, that's confusing. Because I can't imagine people wouldn't want a gathering place.
I think before we, folks, before we allow this to go
Well, I
too-
guess number one would
Yeah.
be more of a good example. So if a new business comes into
Right.
town, we would want non-food or wine. There's going to be new businesses.
There's going to be more discussion on this later tonight. I'm going to hold these questions for right now because I do want to get through it. I want to make this clear, though. We want to get as much of this input as we can tonight. This is one meeting in a series. I'm going to let Peter move on with, you're going to love this part, I just know it. Peter, talk about the downtown study area.
Thanks, Kendall. Go easy on me.
Be gentle. Be gentle.
No, I'm just.
No,
I'm
express.
I'm
Please, I
actually
want to make
just
sure you're
kidding.
clear on this. Everyone, please feel free to express yourself, right? But I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to get through the material, because this is not the end-all, be-all. Whatever happens tonight is not the end of this process. This is one discussion in what will no doubt be a series, which will be very spirited. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I was just kidding. Please go to town. This is about this is about getting everyone's input. Just to sort of step back a little bit, although I don't want to step back very much, so we've got to keep moving forward. But as Christine was talking about, trying to lay the groundwork for why are we doing the general plan, it's about recognizing, what are Yountville's strengths, and I think a lot of people here have, said really sort of passionately what the strengths are to you. That has to do with the community and the character and everything. And also being honest and recognizing what the shortcomings are, what the limitations are over a 20-year time frame. Maybe it's inevitable there is going to be some change, and so the general plan is about shaping that change. And so we wanted to look more closely and have been focused more closely throughout this process. So some of you, I'm sure, many of you were at the last workshop, and so some of this will be familiar. Yes, sorry about that. But we've been focusing on the downtown core and on certain properties, and there are very few sort of in the outlying area. So we're going to start with this discussion of the downtown core, and that's this area highlighted in dashed yellow, which is basically the west side of Washington Street across from where we are today. And the reason we focused on it is that it is right in the heart of town, and a lot of that land is right now devoted to parking lots. And so while that parking is in demand, it also looked like an opportunity for, over the next 20 years, the kind of place where you could get some of these uses that people have been telling us through the process Yountville could benefit from. And that includes a lot of things that were on that list that were not called other. But I think if it's other, it's other, and I think we need to hear that as well. The idea of doing something other than parking lots downtown has to do with shaping the quality of life, shaping the character of Yountville over the next 20 years, helping it to become a sort of enriched version of what it is now, potentially with more social spaces, more gathering places, new businesses that serve a mix of visitors who boost the economy here and residents who live here and enjoy the quality of life. So those were the opportunities that we saw in the downtown core, more than in any other place in Yountville. Our analysis of this site ended up kind of focusing on, you see this colorful blob in the middle. That is a portion of the parking lot directly south of the V Marketplace and behind the Railway Inn. So this is back from Washington Street. It's not right on Washington. It's kind of in the interior of that lot. And so we began imagining and testing what development might look like, what a new building might look like if it was there, and included some of the activities that people have said Yountville would benefit from. And frankly, that our own analysis, found that Yountville could benefit from over the longer term. The colors here are representing, the blue here is where there could be a new parking facility that would serve new uses in the building as well as replace the parking that was lost. Yellow would be active uses along activated paseos in the interior of that site to make it a walkable environment. And then the red is a small portion of that building which could rise up to 3 stories. And part of what we're testing here is using the design guidelines that the city already has, which are very good in a lot of ways, and cause buildings to be stepped back on the upper levels, to have interesting roof forms, to be deferential to surrounding architectural styles, and so on. With those design guidelines in place, and recognizing that there isn't very much land in Yountville that can be built on, is there a place in Yountville where you could go up to 3 stories for a portion of the building? So that's part of what this exercise is testing. And so these next slides just present a series of views of an illustrative building that could be built on that site, almost according to the current regulations, but just making, as I think Christine said, some minor adjustments to make a little bit more development feasible in order to allow for the kind of uses that people have talked about wanting. So that would be in order to enable, as an incentive, to enable an office, a pharmacist, a florist, a yoga studio, the kinds of things that may not be just another wine room, just another tasting room, just another restaurant. This is the view that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Platform 8 is on the right, and you see back into the interior of the V Marketplace site toward the beautiful hills to the west. And the general plan could make this into a protected view corridor. That's not the case now, and we see the potential for that as part of this planning process. This is that view with a potential building there. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth a little bit. And I think I want to highlight the potential for there to be a sort of a feeling of welcome into that site, a feeling of you're entering into a sort of a walkable, slow-paced zone, which is about enjoyment. It's about gathering. And then there are there's a second level to that building, but it's stepped back with a roof line, a sloped roof line, and that second level would have potentially offices or potentially apartments or condominiums. So enabling those kinds of uses that are not very common in Yountville now, enabling the town to sort of support a more diverse set of activities. This is the view from Mulberry Street, again from Washington Street, but looking down Mulberry now, with JCB on the right, and you can see a little bit of Villaggio here on the left. And again, looking back into the site, there's a 2-story section of the building there that you can see. We're imagining that could be something like a gym. And again, you see that second story stepped back. The building form being similar to the JCB cellars. The whole environment, in a sense, potentially being Yountville, just a little bit more of Yountville. So this is why I think it's helpful to see this kind of illustration, because it isn't Vacaville. We're not trying to imagine a totally different kind of a town. We're trying to imagine how can Yountville sort of become more of itself over the next 20 years. This is another view of the site a little bit closer up. And another view into what could become kind of a paseo, which would be open for delivery vehicles, but could be a pedestrian street. And this is sort of notable because this is where we're seeing the 3-story portion of a building. So this is something we want to understand, whether it's an acceptable trade-off for the community, whether it's even a positive trade-off for the community, to imagine being able to allow a 3-story building for a small part of a building back from Washington Street in order to enable the kinds of other activities that people like. And another view showing just the sort of social gathering environment. So I'm going to turn it back to Kendall, and this will be an interesting
I get all the fun
interesting
parts.
response.
Okay, so I already heard him going, dear God, 3 stories, what are they thinking? Yeah, okay. I want to point out again, the thing that we're talking about today is just possibilities. We want to hear your opinion, but I also want to make it clear that the ideas that the team has brought forth are based on the comments that we received in the speaker series and other workshops. Now, that being said, we're here tonight to get yours. So this first question, again, you can put as many of these, select all that apply, and there's already a none in there. I just want to point that out. Ground floor retail for non-food and wine. We're talking about the potential for the sites that Peter was just going through there, the area around V Marketplace. Would you consider having ground floor retail that is not food or wine oriented? Ground floor retail number 2 that is food and wine, which would be more tasting rooms or restaurants, any of that sort of thing. A ground floor service, something that was for the residents, that was resident oriented, and that could of course be a gym, hair salon, whatever that might be. 4, second floor office. That could be an accountant, it could be a dentist, it could be a doctor, it could be anything that is office oriented. 5, second floor residential. And I want to be clear on this. The reason that we're talking about the possibility of second floor residential is this is a community that has struggled with not only affordable housing, but attainable housing, right? So some of you have been able to move here, but a lot of people that come to work here have young families. It's more challenging. So this is one of the ways we sort of approach that as possible alternative to making that work. And then 6 and 7, third floor office and third floor residential. Obviously, if you don't want a third floor, don't select any of those 2 options. 8, I support 2 floors of something but not 3. Or 9, none. Leave the parking lot, don't touch V Marketplace, leave it as it is. So everyone clear on the options here, and then of course we're going to discuss this afterwards, but please go ahead and lock in. Yes, sir? Good question, and we're going to address that in just a moment, I believe, because we're going to come up with parking in just a moment. But for this particular one, everybody's in on that. Let's see what we have to say. Nope, okay, I'll repoll it. Not a problem. Polling is now open. I'm sorry you have to do that again, my bad. I'll wait. Everybody has to vote again, sorry. 1, ground floor, non-food, non-wine. 2, ground floor, food and wine. 3, services. 4, second floor office. 5, second floor residential. 6, third floor office. 7, third floor residential. 8, I support 2 stories but not 3. And 9, none, leave it the way it is. Now look for, again, the connective nod. Are we all, is anybody still waiting? Okay. Then let's go again. Okay, so we have support, it looks like, for ground floor retail. Let's see, 5 is second floor residential, none, keep it as it is. Not a lot of love for the third floor thing. I'm just curious for the folks that did say third floor, what is your thought about why would you support it? And those that do not, I'd like to hear from that as well. So anyone that is for third floor, whether it's retail or office or whatever, yes, sir.
I think third floor gives us an option to continue to grow and grow some affordable residential as well as some of these small local serving offices and businesses.
Okay. And someone opposed? Yes, in the back.
I feel like there are some really tall buildings in town, but those are the exception, and they make Yountville a varied landscape. But for the most part, we have low-lying buildings, and that has been kind of part of the draw of the town, is that it's open and flat, and you can see out. And I think that when you start okaying 3 floors, that is reducing a really distinctive quality that the town has. 2 stories might be okay.
Okay.
But the thing about development is that you hardly ever get what you think you're going to get. You can't mandate that a owner wait with an empty building because you want a hair salon there. It doesn't work that way.
And we're going to talk about that in a minute, about ways you can actually incentivize that. But what I'm seeing up here, though, is actually some diverse viewpoints, because there are some folks that would be okay with some type of development on the ground floor. Not a lot of love for wine, but obviously there's definitely some needs for other types of services and also some alternative residential. We're going to get into this a little further. I want to ask you another couple questions here, and then we'll come back to some of these. What kind of, we're talking about incentives. One of the things we've heard repeatedly at all the meetings and through all the polls is that while the town's economy is very much tied to the wine industry and hotels, that the big desire really is something other than wine and other than that in town. So one of the questions is, how do you, I think to your point, how do you entice a business or a business building owner to bring in that other type of use? And one of the ways you do that is potentially putting in an incentive. And incentives basically say, okay, we're going to change the way that you utilize your space to hopefully get you to push for other types of uses. So in this case, one option would be to allow for greater density. They call floor area ratio. So if you have a piece of property, and let's say it's 10 by 10, currently you can only put 25% of that is buildable. If you agree that you were going to put in something other than food and wine, you could make that a higher use. You could use more of that property. 2 would be to allow 3-story elements, provided they're no taller than the V Marketplace cupola, so that you're not having things like you were mentioning, they're out of character for the town, that they are with the existing heights that are there. 3 would be to allow 3-story elements where upper floors have less ground area. You see that at Bardessono, you see that actually at Maison Fleury. And that, we always think of it as what I call a layer cake, where as the things go up, there's less square footage on the 3rd floor than there would be on the 2nd floor, right? It's set back, so it's not as much. And then 4 would be, you do not support any incentives for development that is not currently allowed. And again, this is specifically for non-food and wine retail. Question?
Could you clarify what the goal of the greater floor area ratio is?
Sure. If I'm a business,
wait a minute.
yeah, say.
Wait a minute. Sometimes developers don't just get more floor area ratio in order to place a low-income house on a property. They get a lot more floor area that they disperse into the bigger houses, as well as having the additional affordable ones. So, I mean, some
This is
people
very
might-
specific to this, in this scenario. This is saying that if you own a property and your property is zoned for business, and you bring in or intend to build a business that is going to be a non-food or non-wine-oriented business, you can have more square footage on your property. It's really
So only that.
correct.
That one
Yep.
space.
Yep.
Not additional
Nope.
floor area for bigger businesses.
Correct.
Okay.
No, there's no trade in it. It's just very simple with that. Yes, back here?
So in the light of discussion
Mhm.
about last voting for 2-story,
Mm-hmm.
is this the vision that you have in this question? Thank you. Could it be changed to from 3-story to 2-story on this question or not?
We're asking this, I'm not sure I understand the question. We're saying at this point, would you allow, like, if you're going to do something different is the concept. Let's say we're talking V Marketplace. If you go to 3 stories and you want to have a business on the 3rd story, it would have to be non-food retail, non-food, non-business, right? I'm sorry, non-food, non-wine. So the idea is specifically to get other types of businesses in the community that are not part of the wine and food piece.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying because there was a graph, many people voted for the 2-story but not the 3, because we just discussed that.
Oh, I see, yeah.
So if you changed it to a two-story.
A two-story is also, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Sandra, it's already allowed at this point, so there's nothing that's going to change. Well, it could change, but that's already allowed. This is an exception. In other words, we're saying that 2 stories is already allowed in Yountville. Would you allow it to go to 3 if you got this other concession? Yes, sir, right here in this, on the aisle.
I'm a little concerned about the way some of the phrasing of these questions is. I mean, for instance, you said allow for 3-story elements where the upper floors are no taller than the V Marketplace cupola, in keeping with the existing character. I wouldn't say that if every building in Yountville was the same height as that cupola, it would be in keeping with existing character.
Then you should oppose that. And what we're saying is that we wouldn't allow it to go higher than that. It's just trying to give you a place to see a difference. So it's not, and Peter, you want to address that?
No, I just also, it's not, this wouldn't apply to every building in Yountville. This is a specific question about the downtown core.
Right, so this is specific to the area that we're talking about on V Marketplace, here.
Okay. The way that was phrased, it feels like it's oversimplifying a very complex issue that is kind of a consensus of urban planning by people that don't have an education in urban planning. So it's really difficult.
We're talking about
a
a specific height requirement on a specific site, as Peter went through for V Marketplace. So we're not talking about other places in the town. We're just saying that there already exists that height there. And I apologize.
When the question was asked, it was posed as though building a building next to that cupola that was the same height of it would maintain the existing character. And I think that's misleading.
I appreciate that. Yes.
I think as we go through these kinds of questions, that it's important to you folks at the top that are putting these questions together and trying to come up with a plan, to keep in mind that we're really only, Yountville's only so big. We can't make it bigger than it is. And it appears to me, with all due respect, that this presentation is about how are we going to develop Yountville to make it bigger and better. Well, we can't make it bigger. We shouldn't make it bigger. It's a walking town. It's a comfortable town. And 3 stories and 2 stories, and let's add this and let's add that. We are then changing the community that we all bought into. And I think that you folks at the front that are going through this need to keep in mind of what it is that the residents and the citizens of this town like, and why it is we're here. That you're trying to change something that has its own charm. And I take exception to that.
Let me be clear. We're not making this stuff up. We're basically taking what the comments had been given by the public. This is the community's plan. I mean, we love the place, obviously, but it's your plan. It's not our plan. So what the community drives on this, and frankly, let's be clear, there are different viewpoints within the community. That we've heard different things at different times from different people. We will continue to do that, but the dialogue will continue to be ongoing. So let me, has everyone had a chance to, yes? Sorry.
I'd like to remind people that are commenting that in the Envision Yountville meetings, the TAG meetings, we've had maybe 1, 2, maybe 5 people from the community come to those meetings. So I think that if people really want to understand this, they need to come and observe those meetings, and they might have a better understanding of what the process we're going through.
Well, and I want to point out too, we've already had some other workshops, but again, everybody has limited time, and frankly, I don't care if this is your first workshop, this is your first time coming, your opinion is absolutely as valid as someone who's been to every single meeting that's been there. Yes?
I just love to jump in and share a few thoughts too. We're not advocating any of these ideas. What we did is we looked at what are the opportunities in Yountville. We're a substantially built out community. There's not a lot of room. So we're really pushing the envelope. We're trying to press your buttons and understand how you feel if we're close on any of these, if these need to be rejected. So this is the kind of feedback we want. I just want it to be clear we're not advocates of any of these ideas. We're exploring, we're bringing you very few opportunities. This is one of them, and we're going to go through a few more very difficult scenarios as the evening goes on, because we really want to try to push those boundaries and understand. So I just wanted to share that.
And basically, it's what we're trying to say. Haters welcome. It's okay. If we do any of these things, that's fine. But I would like you to weigh in on this particular one so we can get to some of the other questions we have. Which kind of, and if again, if none of these appeal to you, then none of them appeal to you. But just as a reminder, which of these, if any, would you support as an incentive for non-food or wine retail services and residential within our community? And again, if none of them appeal to you, then don't do any of them. That's the number 4. I don't support any of them. So looking around for nods, has everybody had a chance to weigh in on that? No? Okay, I'll wait. Give me a shout when ready or a little, okay. You want to give her another clicker? Let me see. Oh, you're good. You got it. Okay, no, she's good.
Got it now.
Okay. All right. All right, let's see what we got to say here. Okay, so lots of folks, majority here, we have don't support anything. Of the ones that do, we would consider allowing greater density, third story. But most folks tonight are basically saying that they don't support anything at this time. Peter.
All right, we're going to go sort of quickly through this. It's a very similar exercise. In this case, we were looking at what would a building look like on the parking lot. Sorry about that. Similar exercise. I'll try to be quick. Imagining what a building might look like that would take place on the parking lot directly across Washington Street from Bouchon. So it's a little bit different in the sense that this exercise is about imagining something that would change right along Washington Street, which may be more part of everyone's sort of everyday experience. And this is the site, and the view from across the street, just south of Bouchon, could be now is a nice crosswalk and a parking lot, and could be in the future what I would say is a sort of a Yountville-like commercial building with something on a setback second floor, and that something might be housing for workforce housing. It might be offices. It might be yoga studios. It might be anything else that was on that list.
Okay, so same kind of setup here. We're actually looking for this, again, for this property. You have a question here? Yep.
No, thank you for bringing that up again, because the other gentleman asked that as well. In this case, I think the idea is that there would be tuck-under parking accessed from the back. So the back half of the parking lot would still be there, and then this building would have tuck-under parking. In the last case, the idea was that there would actually be a parking structure wrapped with active building uses. Yes?
It's possible that this drawing is a bit overwhelming for most of us. I think when the Vintage Inn was approved, the 3 bungalow rooms that are on the street, as this would be on the street, were required to be single-story, small footprint buildings. And really, if you had drawn 3 little bungalows up there, people might be more interested in that. But when you want to maximize the profit of whoever owns the land and you give them a 2-story or 3-story building, they're going to go for it if you don't put restrictions on height, especially along the street.
Right, and I think that's an important point. And there is, currently a 2-story height limit, and that would stay. So this is showing a building that exists within that same building envelope that we already have.
But it's 3-story. But I'm saying that people might be. I'm saying that people might be responsive to this idea of more coverage if it were actually required to be only one story.
I see, okay.
But if I want to make sure I've got this correct, the zoning is already for 2 stories, so that already exists today. But we're going to move on. I think we've made that point. This is now open for discussion, which is basically what kind of development do you support in this area? That's the area that he was just discussing. Again, any of these that work for you or not. 1, ground floor retail, non-food and wine. 2, ground floor service. 3, second floor office. 4, second floor residential. Or 5, none. This should all remain as it is today as parking. As parking, no change. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You could select all of those, or you could, any one of those that you liked, or you could go right for 5, which is none, keep it as parking. So everyone have an opportunity to click in on that. Has anyone not finished clicking in? Okay, let's see what we had to say on this one. Okay, so we have nones. We have some that are for about the same amount for the ground floor retail. But when you look at them across, there's quite a lot of diversity there of what people might or might not consider. I think, again, this is a snapshot of what's in the room tonight, but clearly there's some opportunity. Some folks would like to see something happening there and some would not. I'm curious, for those of you that want to see it just stay as parking, what is it about staying as parking? Is it just to not build anything, or is it to preserve the parking? Yes, right here in the middle.
I voted that way because, reflecting on what Pam had said, because I don't see second floors so close to the street to have that hall-like atmosphere going down the street. So if it was single-story or 2-story cottages, as she had said, it was a large, massive building, and so.
So hypothetically, I know we didn't ask
choice.
because again, we're for lack of a better phrase, kind of spitballing with some of this. But if it was a second floor and the second floor was pushed back so it wasn't flush with the street, is that something you'd be more comfortable with, or is it, in your opinion, not second floor worthy at all?
It may be if they were separate individual buildings and there were
Space
view corridors
between them. Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay.
So we have had a gym in this town, and we have had various retail galleries, wonderful galleries. Those spots are all now wine tasting rooms. I used to manage a center called Washington Square. We could not get retail to, we wanted community serving businesses, local serving businesses to come in, like a bookstore, pharmacy. There's not enough people here to bring those businesses in. So have any studies been done to tell us how we're going to keep from getting more and more wineries?
I would have to refer to staff on that one.
Well, I'm not staff, and I don't know if there's been studies done, but I think that's the idea behind the incentive, is that the market on its own is producing restaurants and wine tasting rooms. And yes, please.
Actually, I'll take that one. If you wander the town, do you see vacancies? Do you see a commercial for rent? Do you see a office space for rent? We have a number of people, businesses that contact the town looking for a place to do business. The current environment has been such that the wine industry will pay a premium for the retail space, outpricing other businesses that would otherwise be willing to come in. So when listening to what a lot of the residents said they would like to see, we've had to be creative in terms of trying to understand how do you try to meet that market interest with some reasonableness. And I just want to remind everybody that in these particular cases, we're not talking about all of this applying town-wide. We're talking about in a very narrow footprint with very particular. And I also want to say, saying no is perfectly acceptable. This is an opportunity for us to try to say, if we're trying to get that, and that's why we're using the phrase non-food, non-wine. So if there's going to be some incentive or trade-off, then it would need to be some of those. So I just want to kind of stress, but the short answer is there is market demand on putting something in Yountville. Now, it may not be a CVS pharmacy, because I will probably guarantee you they won't meet our market criteria, but there is true interest. We have a real concern about maintaining hairstylists, things like that, services, because they need office spaces and they can't compete with the rent market that the tasting rooms are doing. Oh, thank you. The mayor was referring to the fact we have a unique element already in Yountville where we require any new tasting room has to have a secondary retail. We put that in place about 9 years ago when we saw the beginning of an increase of interest in tasting rooms. And that was an attempt to try to diversify and maintain some level of commercial interest so that it wasn't a monolithic tasting bar, if you will, along Washington. And we also, pardon? People are going to define success differently, and I would say it's kept it from being a monolithic tasting room. Some of the secondary retail is very successful on its own. Some of our businesses have been very creative and embraced it. Some have just sort of said, but we actually have, it's now something under our conditional use permit monitoring, we're looking at it. So it's something that the town and the staff and the council have been, actively in the last decade trying to balance that in terms of what might work. And again, it's the same thing. We can incentivize or encourage something in diversity, but we can't necessarily guarantee that something will come.
Thank you, Steve. And for those that don't know, Steve's the town manager here. He's in charge. We're going to move on to Humboldt Street, and we've got one other set of parcels from that. I think that's going to be Christine.
Okay,
and then
that's me.
after we're going to do two more of these that are going to be commercial, and then we're going to start talking about residential. So, Christine.
Okay, so now we're turning to a new area in the downtown. And this is on the east side of Washington Street, these what we're calling the Humboldt parcels, and you can see them here highlighted with the blue line. So as we've been going through this process, what happened was the property owners came to the town and said, hey, we have these parcels. They're zoned for residential use. They're actually zoned Old Town Historic for residential use, and we would like them to be rezoned for commercial. So we said, great, perfect time to bring this forward because we're doing a general plan update, and this is when we are looking at these kinds of options. So the lot itself, there's two parcels. They would be probably combined if it was going to be commercial for one commercial building. And the property owner lives just built a new single-family home to the east on Humboldt Street, so they're right next door. The other residential properties that are to the north, there's a bit of a buffer there, so it seems like it might be appropriate for commercial. Across the street in that purple area, that is the primary commercial area right now. So it's across the street from the side of a commercial building. And while it's not on Washington Street, and we really have all of the commercial uses on Washington Street, it is very close to that corner is very close to Washington. So it's on Jefferson, which is a one-way street coming from the north down to the south, and Humboldt Street is the property that we're looking at. So here is a building. So we looked at what is allowed on this building, and this is really a very rough drawn, and we're just showing you as an example of what could possibly be here if we did rezone it for commercial use. Otherwise, you would have two single-family homes on this because there are two parcels here. So this is an idea of where the building, the size, the footprint of it could be, given the existing development standards, what's currently allowed. And 2 stories is currently allowed on this lot. And so we've asked our illustrator to kind of sketch up a building that would be, if it was a commercial building, what would fit here. And so we're going to be looking at this parcel at the building from the corner of Jefferson, and Humboldt. So this is the view of what's there now. And this is the view of a commercial building. So what we've got here, the concept, and again, just an illustration of commercial down below. And here we're kind of thinking about there could be residential up above, especially because it was zoned for residential use, so this way at least we would still get the 2 housing units, but they would probably be more affordable rather than being single-family homes. They would be apartments or condominiums up above the commercial building. Here, the orientation is on the corner of Humboldt and Jefferson, and the parking would be off to the right and would come off of Humboldt, and the parking lot would be behind this building next to that property owner's single-family home. So again, this isn't a proposal for any kind of, we just wanted to sketch something out so you could envision what something might look like. So I think.
So with this, we've got a couple of questions that relate to this. And again, no is perfectly fine. Would you support rezoning this to from residential to commercial? Click 1 for yes, 2 for no, and 3, it depends. And when we say about shifting from residential to commercial, it could be a combination of commercial and residential on the 2nd floor. It could be commercial, but I think the idea here is commercial on the 1st floor and an apartment on the 2nd floor, some type of a smaller dwelling unit. Or you may have, it depends, you may have another idea about what you would like to see or not see on this. So yes, no, or it depends. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. It could be commercial. I wish we had done it that way too, but we didn't because we are not perfect people. But I'm thinking, for purposes of this conversation today, commercial on the bottom, residential on top, and the it depends, what I would say would be attached to, I'm going to say aesthetic. You know, is the residential set back? I mean, what kind of other things would you like to see? Some other combination. But for purpose of today's conversation, yes means it would be commercial on the bottom, residential on top. No means we don't change anything, and it depends means you've got another idea we haven't discussed. Everybody okay with that as a option for discussion? Okay. Yeah.
No, it doesn't change anything means no, it stays residentially zoned.
It stays residentially zoned.
It doesn't mean no, it stays vacant forever.
No, it's just, it stays the way it is. Someone could build a house later because it's zoned for that, and there'd be 2 houses there, right? Okay. And only 2 of you have not weighed in on this, so I'm going to give you a second. And there's 1 of you, and there's the other. Okay. So, yes, no, it depends. We're still pretty close all the way on this one. Okay. So for the it depends people, what does it depend on? Anybody? Yes, ma'am. Oh, good, very good. Adjacent, whatever the impact is to that. Does it blend with the others? Does it make for good neighbors? Sure.
Go to sleep at night. You know, it depends on the impact to the existing homes that are already there. I think they're the ones that are most impacted, and we have to be sensitive too.
So we didn't pose this, but infer by that, like if the downstairs was a nightclub that was going to be loud and noisy in a residential area, probably not so much, but if it was going to be something that was closed at 5 o'clock, might be okay.
Yeah, and if it had windows that looked down in someone's backyard, I don't think that'd be very cool.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Okay. Any other on the it depends portion of that? Okay, let me ask you this then. That's another little piece here. Again, if you said yes, if you didn't say yes, don't have to answer this, but if you did said yes to the prior question, what building uses, and we just kind of talked about this I think with you just now, what would you approve? What would you be okay with? So if this becomes a commercial on the down floor level, 1, food and wine uses for the ground floor, 2, non-food and wine uses, that'd be retail, 3, require, make sure that that 2nd floor is either apartment or some sort of a condo situation, or 4, would you allow a combination of commercial? So the downstairs would be commercial and the upstairs would potentially be an office. So these are 4 options. You might like 1, 2, or none of them, but you can pick any or all of these that you would be comfortable with. So the ground floor would either be wine uses, food and retail, 2, non-food and wine uses, not a tasting room. 3, require that the second floor be housing, apartment, condo, whatever. Or 4, allow that second floor to also be commercial or retail or an office. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Weigh in on that. We're clicking away here. And if you did not like any of those, you don't have to pick any of these. So I just want to make sure when I look out, nod to me that you've got, those of you who wanted to vote have voted. Okay. No one's waiting to vote that hasn't voted. Okay, all right. Just want to make sure we got everybody in here. Okay, require, that's clearly a big winner on this one. Allow the combination being both. Allow food and wine. So really the requirement and also the non-food food and wine uses seem to be growing. I will tell you that all this information, by the way, is going to be made available online, and I say that for everyone because a lot of folks can't come to meetings, and maybe you've got friends and neighbors and others that couldn't be here. We'll make sure that they can get this information as well. Here's one more question on this particular property. I'm sorry, there's 2 more questions, I lied. But this one's pretty simple. With regard to the downstairs, or even if you go both, would you only want to have daytime uses, number 1, or would you allow evening uses? So that, as an example, would be if it was a bar, restaurant, nightclub. I think I know where this is going to go, but let's see. 1 for daytime, 2 for evening is okay. So that could be daytime and nighttime. So 1 or 2, if this was going to be into that sort of a use. Yeah, if you want to vote for it, even if you voted no, you could still vote on this one. But just for practical purposes, if you had to have one of the 2, what would it be? But if you don't want to have either one, don't vote for either one. Whatever you're comfortable with. We don't want to force anyone into voting something they don't want to vote for. Okay, everybody in? Yeah, that was a shocker. Okay, what brave soul wanted a nightclub? Come on. Share with us. No? All right. Yes? Oh, it could be a gym. Okay. A very quiet gym, right?
Ours was pretty quiet.
All right. Goat yoga kind of thing, right? Okay. All right. They have goat yoga in my town now, which I just can't even believe. Okay. All right. Here's another question based on this one. Again, looking at this, what type of design, if we were to take these 2 parcels, what type of design, if any, again, if you don't like any of these, don't select them, 2-story building with storefronts fronting Humboldt, with storefronts fronting Jefferson, with the orientation which has that corner, that's basically what was shown in the design, okay? Or 5 other. Although I don't really know what an other would be in this case, but we'll let that go. 1 story, I guess could be an other on that one, but it's already zoned for 2 stories, right? Yeah. Okay, it is already zoned for 2 stories regardless, but other could be 1 story. So whatever you're comfortable with, if you wanted to see this change. Again, if you don't want to see it change, don't worry about that, but please select any of those that you would be okay with, anything you would support. 2-story building, storefront fronting Humboldt, fronting Jefferson, straddling both, which is shown in the design, or other. Is everybody in on that one? Okay, let's see what we got here. As it was shown, other. On other, who had an other that they would like to share? Anybody have an other that they don't want to share but will make you share anyway? I'm sorry. 1 story, okay. 1 story. Anybody else? Okay, well, let's go to, I think this is our final commercial place.
This is our last commercial
Yes,
area. We're
okay.
moving up Washington Street now. And we're looking at, and actually we looked at this at the second workshop, so this might look familiar to you. We're looking at there's six remaining residentially zoned parcels on Washington Street. Everything else along Washington Street has at this point been rezoned for commercial use. So there's 6 left, and there are single-family homes, they're pretty small single-family homes on these lots. And when we looked at this in November, we actually had, at the time, a majority of the people were okay with rezoning this for commercial or some sort of mixed use, mixed commercial residential use. And we wanted to bring this back because we thought there were a couple of other options that we wanted to explore with everyone. So again, the 6 units, I don't have my glasses on, so I can't, Creek, that's it, Creek and Padroni. They're between Creek and Padroni on the east side of Washington Street. And there is commercial there's Jessup Cellars to the north, there's the French Laundry to the south of these 6 parcels. And the question that's come up, one of those houses is a brand new house and is unlikely to be converted to commercial use. And then the other 2, kind of in the middle of those 6, they're very small, there's not a lot of parking, and there's residential homes behind that access those parcels. So it might be difficult because you might get some commercial traffic going through to access the residential behind. So we thought, well, why don't we bring this back and say, should we consider rezoning all 6 to commercial? Now, when I say rezone, what that means is that they can stay residential use. It's just that if the property owner wanted to expand or wanted to convert to commercial, they could convert to commercial sometime in the future. And because these are pretty small and there's a general plan, there's a rule in the town, in the municipal code, that requires if a development is going to lose a housing unit, it has to replace that housing unit. So one of these could become a commercial building, but then that property owner would have to find a new housing unit to build somewhere else in town. Or, and more likely what would happen here is we're really talking about kind of a live-work situation. So this would be like a home where somebody lives in it, but they want to have a little business within the home, and then they could have an opportunity to have a few clients come and visit them during the day, and so that kind of a use is really probably what's most practical here in these 6 on these 6 parcels. So the question really is, should we look at rezoning all 6 of these to some sort of commercial neighborhood kind of commercial use, or should we just look at these 2, the northernmost and the southernmost parcels, because those are really probably the most viable for commercial use? Or should we leave them as residential?
So then on this one again, and I don't know, maybe some of you have seen these situations in other communities. I know San Luis Obispo has them. They have like an accountant that might have their office downstairs and live upstairs. I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3. You up here first.
Just for clarity, at least for me, so one of the issues that you folks have brought up again and again and again is our lack of residential housing. So why would we consider taking residential properties that are already residential and making them commercial? I mean, what's your thought? Where are you going with this? Because, if the residential problem is such a huge problem, then
it's a great question. It actually came out of the previous workshop where the folks at the table said we'd like to consider this as possibility for a live-work situation. Like, for example, if you had a business you wanted to bring to town and it was an accountant, or I'm trying to think of others, I'm sorry? Well, a service-oriented business, and you didn't want to have an office, and then you didn't want to have a residence on top of that. They were asking whether or not we could entertain the idea of that sort of live-work situation where you could see clients, you could have a storefront on top, but you could also live there. So again, this might not be viable. It's just an idea that was thrown out based on the public input that we got from previous meetings. So again, not generated by us, generated by the people that had the input at it was November, right? November, October, at our last workshop.
Yeah, well, I kind of agree with the gentleman that talked before that said to some extent it's a little misleading because you're asking us to pick things without, giving us a great understanding of what it is.
It's very challenging with this, because again, and you're right, when you do a general plan, yeah, if you take housing away from here, you got to find it someplace else. And it's the same thing with parking, and it's the same with a number of other things. And in fact, in just a minute, we're going to talk about opportunities for additional housing. And I know from some folks that have said things, people think, I'm here, we don't need any more housing, we're done. We do hear from the community, quite a few people have some concerns about a lack of affordable housing or a lack of ability to get people to move here to be teachers or be doctors or do other things in the community. It's not changing the community, it's just saying, what degree do you want to have flexibility? But anyway, that's why that came out of a previous meeting. I want to go back to the gentleman, I think it was behind you here, but yeah.
Thank you. My question really is, it feels like a lot of these are a little bit out of context, and I wonder if there's a component of what you've studied that looks at the idea that keeps coming to mind for me is Ranch Market 2. It's a really inefficient use of that lot. There's a lot of parking there, a huge roof. It looks like a second story, but it's not a second story, and it's over a very large grocery store. It feels like incentivizing a more efficient use of existing parcels that are within the commercial zone seems like a better way to go than to then start thinking about converting residential lots, rezoning them to be commercial when we have kind of an inefficiency in the existing.
It's a great comment, and again, this is a response to requests from folks that came to a previous meeting. So and there are other things we're going to be looking at, but you're right, that's one of the reasons we're looking at V Marketplace and some of those. Those are commercial areas that are potentially underutilized. If you haven't looked at it already, and it's on the website, there's a great summary document that kind of does a whole capsule of the history of the town and what's out there, and there's a really cool workbook that a lot of folks worked on for the last year or so that has some of that background information.
When you say at the last workshop, I think I was at that last workshop, so I don't necessarily see these questions addressing what I gathered from that last workshop. So.
Well, we had 14 tables. There were a little under 100 people that came, so I mean, I'll defer over here. But some of the feedback we got back also on the, on the surveys that happened afterwards, and then again through the technical advisory groups, was saying, take a look at these areas and let's talk about it. Now, again, they may not change at all, so I don't want to waste your time and say that they're going to change. But this was something. There were several areas that people wanted to get into greater detail with. This is one of them. Whether it changes or not, that's going to be up to the collective think, and frankly, at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the council. But we're going to provide them with all of this input to say, here's what people said, here's what the concerns that were raised. Do you want to go there or do you not want to go there? But it's a collaborative at this point. None of these things are done deals. This is all for discussion. Nothing has been determined. This is just based on what people told us. This is what the project team put together to say, okay, if you want to see it, these are your options. Yeah, there was one question over here.
On the lot at Padroni, the existing building crosses the dividing of the two lots. It's built on both lots. And you're proposing, to separate that. How would that proposal happen with the existing building?
Well, one of the options here, again, this is you can see on the the dark blue at the top and the dark blue at the bottom, that would be rezoning only the northernmost and southernmost. But Christine, did you look at those in greater detail as far as the straddle on that one?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
This building on the, yeah.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, okay.
On each of those 6 parcels, there are individual dwellings on them. None of them straddle property lines. It may look like that top northernmost one does. It's the 2-story stone building. There's a very small wood 1-story building that's right next to it, and then the one that's under construction further south. So they are all independent structures on independent parcels. And I've got a question here.
Okay, yes.
Instead of opening up the zoning to commercial for those properties, I'm wondering which would attract certain buyers to those properties who maybe have a lot of money to invest in that. Why not just create a zoning district that is live, work, historic district, so that it maintains the residential quality and allows some local serving kinds of businesses to be run from those locations, rather than open it up to commercial, which doesn't have very much restriction.
I'm going to defer to Christina, on the right, but I think that's kind of what we're proposing.
I think that's exactly what we're talking about here when we say commercial use. That is, you know, what we're talking about and what we talked about the November workshop is some sort of local serving services, maybe boutique retail, certainly not food and wine uses.
Right.
And not lodging. Pardon me?
It's a lodging component.
Right, so as I mentioned, I mean, we could require housing to be on these lots, but there is that rule in town that if the housing were to, if it was converted completely to commercial, the property owner would need to build a new housing unit somewhere else in town. So that's very unlikely that that
unless
would,
they had the
that would
building
happen.
that was, unless it
Or-
became residential.
Or they,
commercial.
Right, unless
And
it was
for the
residential.
clarification on that, I don't know how many of you have ever run a home business, but at most places, like, if you work from home, as long as you don't have clients that come see you and do things, you know, you can have a home office, that's one thing. But there are some types of businesses, and what comes to mind for me are attorneys, lawyers. I know a chiropractor that does that, and actually I have a masseuse, that she works from home. She has an office there, and then her actual, you know, kitchen, her kids, they live upstairs, but it's all in the same unit. It has to be zoned commercial in order for her to see clients and people come to and in and out of that business. That's why the zoning changes. So it's not necessarily saying that you're going to dump out the residential entirely, but I think for clarification, and what I'm kind
Sure,
of
and I'll
thinking
jump in
tonight,
again
yeah.
too, if that's okay.
Go, Sandra.
So the reason this is before you is because Washington is uniformly a commercial district from one end to the other, with the exception of these 6 parcels. And over the years, we've heard interest in rezoning them from some. You know, there's opposition from others. So we thought this is a good time to present this to you. What is unique about these 6 parcels is they're unlike any of the other commercial districts, which are much larger with larger commercial buildings. So I think the comment here from Pam is that a new zoning district that recognizes a live-work situation may be most appropriate. When we present the question to you, it's on a broader level, the conversion from residential to commercial, rather than the change from Old Town Historic, the residential district, to some live-work zoning district. But that is something that, if there is support, we would explore more down the line. We're looking at it sort of at a higher level at this stage, and that's some of the history behind it. And I think we've shared what some of the more viable uses would be, because the buildings and lots themselves are so small.
Okay, so let's go ahead and lock in on this one and go ahead and express your preference on this. Rezone to commercial, and again, in the context, we're talking about a commercial, residential, historic district sort of situation. 2, only rezone the northernmost and southernmost parcels. Those are the ones that were closest to the French Laundry and the one at the north end of the street. Or 3, just leave it alone. Don't touch it. Make it just stay the way it is. No change, no change, no change. So 1, 2, or 3. We've got 6 of you to go. And click it in there. Okay, we're going to close it. 3, 2, 1. Leave it residential, rezone all 6, only rezone the normal. So leave it at residential. I think there's more folks today that kind of are in that mindset at this point. I want to ask you one more question about this particular thing before we move to residential. Again, there's a no on here. I just want to point that out. There's a no. We've talked about a lot of other things in town, the possibility of taking parking out of the V Marketplace and doing other things. Again, this is just a question. If you would even remotely consider the demolition of these buildings to add additional parking and parking access to the downtown area. Pretty straightforward. It's a yes, no, or it depends. And again, this would be, you were not talking about going and demolishing someone's home because I think one was just built there. It's just saying that if the property owner at a future date decided they wanted to sell the property and convert it to a parking lot, that they'd be able to do that. It's not saying that anyone's going to be forced from their home and have their kitchen bulldozed in favor of parking. But if they wanted to, would you consider it? That's a yes, no, or it depends? The property owners, yeah. The property owner would have, so you wouldn't, all of these things that we're talking about, just to be clear, if you have a piece of property and you are utilizing it for a particular use, the general plan only looks at what's in the future for that. It doesn't go backwards and then say, well, you can't do that anymore. It looks at what happens down the road. So we're not impeding anybody's property rights or anything else in that particular area. All right, here we go. No love for a parking lot. Okay, so now we get to the fun part. We're going to start talking. I can hardly wait. We're getting ready to start talking about residential uses. And I wanted to, just before Christine moves into this, I want to remind everybody that through the entire process of Envision Yountville and just in general in the community, I think as Christine mentioned early on, you know, this is not a community that's going to be 30,000 people. It's just not. I mean, we thought that in the Wayback Machine, but it's really about adapting to the needs of the community, meeting state mandated housing requirements, and making sure that people do have adequate housing stock moving forward. And what that looks like is what we're going to be talking about next, about some potential areas. And again, this is just for discussion tonight. Nothing has been built at this point. Christine.
Thank you, Kendall. Okay, so I can't really do this discussion without giving you some technical background about housing elements, so please bear with me. A housing element is one of the elements, it's one of the chapters of the general plan, and it's the most highly regulated chapter of a general plan. In fact, the state requires a town, a city, to update their housing element every 8 years. And as part of that process, the state, and it kind of goes through a complicated process, it starts at the state level and then it goes down to what we call a regional council of governments, which is an association of Bay Area governments for us. And then it comes down to the cities, where we're actually, every town is given housing units that they are expected to zone for, to have appropriate zoning and available sites to accommodate their regional housing need. So this is, by law, has to be done, and it has to be done every 8 years. Now, this town went through their housing element process just a few short years ago, and the housing element right now is valid from 2017 through the end of 2022. So come probably January of 2023, the town will have to adopt a new housing element. The town was able to identify enough sites to accommodate the 17 units, and it was only 17 units of housing that was given to the mandate was given to the town. And this town found the sites, and the housing element was certified. Now, come 2022, we don't know exactly what the housing mandate will be, but it will probably be looking at, we've looked at what the forecasts are that the state has developed recently for population and housing, household growth, household formation over the next 20, 30 years. Probably a good bet it's going to be another 17, 20 units when the time comes around. Now, this is what the regional housing need was for, I think I said 2017 before, 2014 to 2022. This is how the 17 units, there was 4 for very low income, 2 for low income, 3 for moderate, and 8 affordable to above moderate. Those, that nomenclature, low, very low, it really kind of depends on how many people are in the household. So I won't really get into what all of that means exactly, but you can think of it like this. Above moderate are usually, they're single family homes. That's affordable to above moderate incomes. Moderate incomes, we're really talking about condominiums sometimes, a second story, like mixed use apartment buildings. And these can be for rent or they could be for purchase, for sale units. We're talking second units can be at market rate, are generally affordable to moderate incomes. When you get down to the very low and low, those are always the hardest units to get, because really the only way you're going to get them is if there's some sort of a subsidy or some sort of a requirement that the town places on them that makes the developer deed restrict those units so that they're affordable to low and very low income units. And that's what usually happens in order to get those. And this is a very common distribution, and probably what you'll see next time around. So the town has already developed a lot of units. In fact, we're way over on the above moderate. It's negative right now. So the above moderate, the moderate have been taken care of. The moderate units were taken care of through, there was a second unit that was developed, there was a unit downtown over commercial, because you have a couple of units that, apartments that are built over commercial downtown. There were also some deed restricted units that were built at Vineyard Oaks, so that helped to knock down the very low and the low requirements. So there are 4 more units that are left that the town doesn't have to build, but the town has to make sure that there's available sites. And so those sites are on those 2. Remember way in the beginning of this evening, I talked about that there were 2 vacant sites still left that hadn't been developed. That's where the town said that those are where the sites are that can accommodate these units. So the north one is at the French Laundry Garden site. And as I mentioned earlier, that site is zoned for primary commercial, and it has an affordable housing overlay. And the housing element says that it was anticipating 15 units could be built on that site. We know that the property owner is probably not going to develop any housing on that site. Down at the bottom, at the Catholic Church property, the assumption was that there could be 18 units built at that site. And for any time that there's a development more than 5 units, the town requires that 15% of those units be deed restricted for low and very low income units. So we're assuming that we'll get 3 units affordable to lower income. That's what the plan was. Now, if that French Laundry Garden site is developed and it doesn't have any housing built there, now the town only has 1 site left with 3 units and has to come up with another site for just 1 unit. But that's where the housing element had said that the units would be found. So where will new housing go? First of all, if that French Laundry site, like I just said, if it's developed without housing, the town is going to be obligated to find a replacement site. At the time that it approves the development, it will have 90 days to rezone a site if necessary. So that's an issue. We don't know, it's not an issue we have to deal with right now, but it's an issue that could potentially be facing the town fairly soon, certainly within the life of this general plan. Again, I just said that the future state mandate is probably from 2023 within the life of this general plan, is going to require the town to find appropriate sites for another 20 homes thereabout. We don't know for sure. Where will the new housing go? So there is that South Mixed residential parcel. As I mentioned earlier, the housing element is only saying that there's potential for 15 units, but it's actually large enough to accommodate more if a flood wall was built. And the flood wall is expensive to build, but it is possible. It's just that that site's been identified for a long time for housing, and no housing's been developed there. So it's questionable how truly feasible that site is for new housing. Downtown mixed use, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we've been exploring through those development scenarios we were looking at the marketplace, where you could have additional housing on second stories downtown, and those could help to kind of address your housing mandate that's going to be coming. There's the Veterans Home. The Veterans Home does have a lot of housing, new housing that was identified there, not just for the Veterans Home residents. They are talking about expanding the number of beds there for the residents, but they also have a plan to build more housing for the employees who work there, and there are a lot of employees at the Veterans Home, and just general workforce housing. So that's a site. It's not a site that the town has any control over, because that site is owned and operated and run by the state, and the state has all the development control over there, and we can't say, oh, we're just going to put our 20 units there, we're done. That's not allowed with the housing element, but it is a possibility. If it does get built there, the town does get to count it. And then finally, there's this North Agricultural parcel, which really is one of the last remaining large undeveloped sites. So we looked at the North Agricultural parcel at the November workshop, And at the time, I don't know how many of you were here then, but we looked at it and we said, okay, well, there's first of all, there's some fabulous things about this site. It's such a beautiful site, and it's got beautiful views that really need to be preserved. It's been in long-time vineyard use, and the property owner, I think is over here, is not interested in developing the site. We do know that. It is zoned for agricultural use. As zoned for agricultural use, it can be, you can have not just a vineyard, but a wine processing operation and even retail. So it could have a winery built on that site that's allowed in the development code. It's also partially within a floodplain, so that is a constraint on this site. It's unlikely that, or probably inadvisable, to have development in that blue area over there. And as I said, that arrows there is showing kind of the scenic view corridor. So when we looked at this site in November, we wanted to just kind of open it up to envisioning different uses for the site, and we had asked everyone, well, are you interested in it staying in agricultural use with the possibility of having a winery there? Are you interested in like lodging? We looked at a spa, we looked at residential use, and probably the most people were saying that they were in favor of residential use. So we started kind of exploring that idea with our town advisory group. We took a vote. It was kind of 50-50. It was actually 51 against, 49, it was one more over. We took it to the ZDR, the Zoning and Design Review Board. Only 3 people were there, but they were in favor of residential use. So we it sounds like it's kind of split what the community wants, and we wanted to bring it back. One of the things that we thought of after talking to the Zoning and Design Review Board, they said, hey, why do we just have this small housing mandate? Why don't we just pull back the area that we were talking about and zoning for residential in just a small portion of this site? So we kind of took it back to these 2 areas. These are 2 3-acre parcels, or areas, I should say. And then to the right, it looks like, there could be like a little neighborhood park, for example, over there. So we kind of brought that back. So now that's what we're talking about. That's the idea we wanted to explore tonight with you and get your feedback on zoning this, not right now, because we're actually really thinking about saying, kind of calling this housing reserve, so that sometime in the future, if the town needed to find a new place for housing, that this would be a site that should be looked at in the future. So we would kind of rezone it, something called housing reserve is the idea we have right now. So we asked our illustrator to kind of sketch this, just because it's a lot easier to imagine what it might look like when you get to see it. And we're talking about mixed residential, which is exactly what's zoned for that South Agricultural parcel by the Catholic Church. So it's a mix of single-family homes, about 50% single-family homes, and the rest multi-family. So we took, the first illustration I'm going to show you is looking from Stag's Leap. And this is the current view. And this is the illustrated view. So I'm just going to go kind of back and forth on that so you can see that, because that's always fun to do. So, so here, what the illustrator did was to put a bike path going in the front. The driveways would actually be from the rear, from Yountville Road. That's how you would access this development. Single-family homes are shown here in the front. And because it is an agricultural and it's right on the edge of town, his idea was that there would be a vineyard, kind of, a buffer, a vineyard in front of this development, kind of like what Bardesano has now. So that is the idea. The single-family homes are here in front. The multifamily would be behind it. I think we were talking, now I'm drawing a blank, something like 15 single-family homes. Was that right? 15 single-family homes and maybe 15 multifamily, something like that. Not a tremendous amount of homes anyway. And then this is a view looking from Talent. So you're going to look across here, get kind of a closer view. That's the current existing view. And here's a view from Talent Lane. Over there on the left is just kind of a pathway that would access the rear of that development, but a pedestrian bicycle pathway. That's just the concept, what he sketched for us. Again, just to help you kind of imagine what this might look like so that you could give us your feedback, not advocating it one way or the other. I think
That's it. Now, before we go to this next slide, I do want to point out again, this is looking down the road at future, and for anyone in the room that might own the property, it does not retroactively change your property rights. It's basically, if you ever decided down the road that you wanted to do something different, if the zoning allowed it, you could do that, but it doesn't change anything that's happening right now. And what we're going to ask folks to do, this is a little different than some of the other things we've been looking at, but basically it's ranking. You have a question?
I would like to comment because we all talk. This is a real hot button for me. We just retired. We just bought a home in the Crossroads. We bought it on their vineyard because of the view, for the quality of life that is what you're all talking about. And I find it unbelievable that I would buy a home, I would tear it down, I would build it back, I would getting a final to move in 5 days ago, and today you're talking about putting homes in my backyard and ruining the view that I paid for, and we paid a premium for it because there are so few vineyard views in Yountville, and the vineyards are what make our community. So I think you really need to trust me, I can envision what that looks like, and it's not very pretty to me.
Well, and I think that's the reason that we're asking tonight. These are the 4 areas that came up through land use. We're just asking to say, like, if you don't want that one, great, then don't pick that one. But again, it's not saying that we're going to do it. It's just asking if we should. Yes.
Hi, my name is Ren Harris. I'm here representing the family that owns that parcel. It would have been nice to be part of this discussion when it first started. I probably could have saved you a lot of time. That parcel has been in our family since 1936. The 5th generation is there now. The 6th one, first member of the 6th generation, is due in August. It is not a 33-acre parcel. It is part of our family ranch, which is approximately 1,000 acres. And it's surrounded by all the other vineyards that are contiguous. In fact, the rows don't stop. The rows at that point are over a mile long. It includes the hills north of town. And you're wrong about this has no consequences in the future, because right now I understand you can't make us sell it. You can maybe let us build a winery. We're not planning on that either. But if you rezone it, some of us are going to die. And if it's zoned for residential, the value of the property is going to take a leap by a factor of probably 10, where a $200,000 parcel becomes a $2 million parcel. And can we afford to pay the death taxes? That's a problem. We'd rather you just leave it be. We don't want it, we won't need it. And the vineyard that's on there now is just 1 year old, just going in. It's going to be there for 30 years. I suspect I'm going to be back here every 8 years or whenever you redo your plan, telling you the same news all over again. But the family estate plan, as it sits, is not to sell anything. We never have. Since 1936, we've added to it a couple of times. We've never sold anything, don't plan on it. And the lady was talking about just building a house over here. They wanted to buy a small sliver office to enlarge their property. We wouldn't do that either. So we're pretty much stuck in our ways, and I think you could save yourself a whole lot of trouble by just kind of crossing that off your future list, because I don't believe it'll happen.
I would, yeah, there you go. Okay, all right. Okay. I'm going to take a quick comment from the gentleman to your right.
Thank you. I just want to say that it's almost ludicrous for us to sit here casually discussing what a private owner in our community should or should not or might not do with his own private property. And I would hate to think that those are the tenets on which this community is built. It's not right, and that property is such a scarce, beautiful resource of this community, and the future of that parcel should be totally in the hands of the people that own it and the way that it's currently zoned.
Thank you. I'm going to defer to Steve back here because I think he's ready to address why that property. Steve?
Well, a couple things. And one, first of all, the town has been working with representatives of the property. This property is owned by multiple people with descendants, so Ren, it's inappropriate to characterize that we haven't reached out because we've been talking with Mr. Hoxley. Well, I was going to say, I've had meetings with Andy. I'm just saying, so part of it would be for clarity, if there is, but what I want to come back, this discussion is a community discussion, and this parcel is zoned agriculture. I want to go back and just remind everybody, because we're talking about, I heard all the applause that said, let the property owner do whatever they want to do on their property. I've heard a lot of different conversations from people about letting the other property owners throughout town potentially do what they might want to do on their property. So I'm just going to ask for folks to recognize that what we're talking about is a future going forward. Many of you that live in neighborhoods east of Washington and east of Yount, I have news for you. If you don't know what your property was before 1975, I do. You can go look. Most of it actually wasn't vineyard. It was a mixture of vineyard, prune orchards, and regular agriculture. And I just want people to realize we're not talking about taking any property owner's rights away. You're talking about what the zoning could be. And I want to point out that a lot of the comments have been a result of feedback from property owners saying, hey, we might want to look at doing something. Is this appropriate? You know, a fun little story about the history of Yountville is one of the major focuses of incorporation came around the property ownership trying to build a mobile home park. So I just want people to recognize not taking anybody's rights, talking about what might be and what's appropriate. And we do have, I've also heard loud and clear from some people, just don't do anything. Tell the state to go boom. And that's not something that your elected officials and the appointed staff can do. We have obligations and fiduciary responsibilities. I just kind of want to put that out there because this process is one, and you know, I've also heard the question, well, why are you changing the 1992 general plan? Well, we actually have received what's known as kind of a default notice from the state because they actually consider our 1992 general plan a little outdated. In other words, it's not contemporary. So we've kind of, as a community, stalled on this for a while and are going through the update process. And I also want everybody to recognize there's a lot of competing interest. It is really challenging for staff and the elected to try to come up with things that balance, because you've seen a lot of, some folks like something, some people are equally opposed. But what you're seeing in a lot of these is there's a mixed range. And I'm also going to be honest with you all, zoning is really hard to talk about because we all turn to, well, I want to see exactly what it's going to be. It's not an application at this point in time. It's what it could be. And I also want to remind a lot of people that we have a lot of people that buy into the community and then they start reinvesting in it. They remodel and renovate the home that they bought. So change, and I think what we're talking about here in Yountville is incremental change consistent. And I know we've talked about flexibility. You know, we've had an earlier conversation about home-based occupations. Is there a little more opportunity for some flexibility in certain areas? We're trying to work on some of those things. So I just kind of want to put a little levity to what we're doing. But for people that say, we don't have to address or deal with the potential for where housing could be built. That's just not true. You can believe that, you can feel that, but the community has a legal responsibility to address that. So the question here is simply prioritizing that. I will also point out that the current council has put a lot of energy and a lot of encouragement in staff to try to develop partnerships for additional housing at the Veterans Home. We're putting a lot of energy and enthusiasm into that. Our challenge, though, as was pointed out, is it actually doesn't count in the process presently right now because that's state property. So, and that's why we're putting it there. It's there so people can see that that's an area that we want to put focus. So I just want to bring some clarity to where the 18-month conversation and travel down the path is going for some people that are just plopping in and perhaps more focused on one issue, because it's a broader issue. We certainly understand that people close to that vineyard don't want to lose the vineyard view. People close to other vineyard areas don't want to lose the vineyard view. And it all depends on where you're at in the community as to what view you might have or might not, or what impact. So it is a diverse community. So I just kind of want to bring us back all together and kind of realize what the intent of this general plan exercise is.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I think we had one question up here, the gentleman in the checkered shirt.
Where?
Yeah. Gingham, sorry.
Steve helped explain some of my confusion, but I'm still a little bit confused, and that has to do with the Veterans Home, because we were told up front that there are restrictions there. I don't understand the restrictions, but we were also said, well, we don't have control because the state owns it. Well, we don't have control over Ren Harris's property either.
Correct.
So I was just wondered if you could clarify with regard to the Veterans Home what the restrictions are, if there are possibilities of negotiating through those restrictions.
So, great question. The state owns the property, so they determine what will happen with the property. But one of the things that the town can do is work with the state and with the veteran home to determine if they have property available that they'd be willing to let us utilize for housing. And that's a conversation, that's a collaboration. It's not something we can actually control, but yes, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to talk about how we are trying to control it.
Yeah.
For probably 2 years now, I've been working along with Steve and others with the town. Many conversations with the Secretary of Calvet. They are the ones that basically own and operate the home. There are very significant conversations going on about adding housing, combination of employee, workforce housing, homeless veteran housing, and other types. So it's an active conversation. The Department of Veterans Affairs is reviewing the entire property, including the existing facilities, the undeveloped parts of the campus. They have several hundred acres that are undeveloped. So we're talking about using some portions of the undeveloped parcels to build new housing. So I believe we would be satisfying our state requirements with that housing, even though it is on state property. That's part of the ongoing conversation. We could eliminate all of the other conversations we're having about housing if this relationship comes to reality. That's why we're putting a lot of our time and energy into it. But it ultimately isn't our choice, but they've been very supportive. So we're very optimistic that we're going to find some solutions for not only our minimum housing needs that are already here, but for many years, even decades to come.
Doug, good question, and I just want to give you the simple answer is the North Ag parcel is in the town limits, and everything that is officially in the town limits, except that which is owned by either the county or the state, is subject to the town zoning. So that is why the current property is regulated with its zoning, agricultural, and the sub-details. We do not have zoning control over state property, and we wouldn't have zoning control over a county parcel. So that's, when we talk about control, that's where we're coming from that standpoint.
And just one last thing about the Veterans Home housing possibility. because the state already owns the property, that's going to have a very significant impact on the types of housing that could be built there. Generally speaking, we're talking about private capital investment coming in as a partner with the state, building the housing at their expense, and then they would be in charge of leasing those units to whomever it is that's living there. They would make their money back over those 30 years, 50 years, whatever it is. That's what we're talking about right now. We have not only the Department of Veterans Affairs, but also the governor's own advisory commission, which is called the Little Hoover Commission. Some of you have probably heard about that. They are also supportive of the housing concept that we've been discussing. The town has infrastructure already in place that can support at least a few hundred units. That's not houses, that's units like apartments, mostly. So we've already told them we have water and sewer capacity to build if we could find the right partners to do it. And so it's complicated, but it's still, I think, a very positive dialogue, and so we're going to keep at it.
And we wanted to continue that. Curtis, I'm going to have go right here to his right. Come up, follow, stop. There you go.
I'll just stand so that, I appreciate the comments from the mayor, and I've had the privilege of participating in a lot of sessions. I've actually gotten to know a lot of the folks. And I think that whether or not you've been able to participate in the sessions, popping in or not, as it were, it's really a sentiment. And you know, when I heard the applause for the North Agricultural Parcel staying as it is, I didn't see hear a rejection of growth or the need to occupy or to address growth. I heard that we collectively, as a group, in partnership with the staff, need to find a way to accommodate the state's goals without putting the agricultural parcel on the table. And I think that's what our sentiment is. That's what we're trying to do.
Well said. I'm gonna, before we take any more comments, because some of these are repeat comments, I want to get through this particular question, and we'll come back to you. But I want to get through these two questions, because then we'll come back and open it up, because I do want to finish this up. And I have a feeling I know where this is going to go. Again, this is a priority ranking. So I want you to put these 4 things in order. Pam, I'm going to wait until after we're done with this one, and then we'll come back to you, okay? So, well, let me finish this, and then we'll come back to it. These are 4 places in order. If you don't only want one of them, then only vote for one of them. But in the order that you put them in, the first one will get 10 points, the second one will get 7, the third 4, and the fourth 1. So if, for those of you, as an example, that absolutely don't want to see anything on the North Agricultural Parcel, do not put number 4. If you would rather see just, I don't know, number 1 and number 2, you can do that. The Veterans Home is on there really for us to get a sense from you of like, yes, staff, keep working with them. Again, we can't control it, but we're trying to get the feedback if that's an area you'd like to see. So of these 4, in any order, 1, 2, 3, 4, your first choice, second choice, third choice, and if you have a 4th choice, your 4th choice. If you only have 1, just put 1. Is anybody unclear on that concept? Okay, so go ahead and lock in those particular pieces, and we'll see where we go. We've only got a few more of these left, and then we will open up the floor for additional comment. Okay, has everybody loaded in their choices? Anyone not loaded in? Okay. I don't think this is going to be a surprise. Okay, so again, these are weighted, and what we can see there is that the Veterans Home, yay, Veterans Home, make that happen. That is the first choice, second choice being South Mixed. We do see some folks that are interested in the downtown and not a whole lot in North Agricultural Parcel. Again, we just floated it out here tonight to see what types of things we might be looking at. This is a big if, and this is the downtown only. This is the downtown. If we do allow residential mixed use in the downtown, would we want to have 2nd floor residential use or 3rd floor? You can pick both. If you're okay with 2nd floor, number 1, 3rd floor, number 2, you can pick both. And again, I think just in the numbers of the places we're talking about, we're looking at future housing needs that may be, 15, 20 units. And based on the things we've shown you tonight, there may be combinations of these things that could get you there without having to look at any other properties. But just we want to see if there's any love for that, for one or two. Looking for a few more of you left. And everybody in? Okay. So I think we heard this again earlier tonight, second floor, okay. There's not a lot of love for third floor at this point. That's what I heard tonight, but we'll see how that moves on. And we've got one more question that relates to this, I believe. Yes, for the veterans home, and I think that we know where this is going to go. This is a yes or no. Should we encourage new housing development on the veterans grounds? 1 yes, 2 no. I think this could be one of those consensus questions. Could be. We'll see. Okay, we've got just a few more of you in to go. And then we've got the one that's going to blow up my machine. All right, let's see here. Everybody's in. Yes. I'm not even going to ask who said no. But okay, that's good to know. Now, here's the one again. We've got one more property besides this one, but this is just a question for the North Ag parcel. Should the city or should the town consider redesignating 6 acres for potential uses housing, or should it just leave it alone and wait until it is required to designate new housing before considering rezoning? And neither. I think there should be a neither. Let me add that one in. Pardon me for not. I will do that right now. Hold on here. I'm going to try to capture the sentiment.
I heard a question about, has anybody defied the state and not done their housing? If you do that, you are open, this town would be open to a lawsuit, and the state has the right at that point to come in and take over the town's land use authority, and the town would not be allowed to issue any development proposals or to approve any new development until they adopted a housing element that was certified by the state. So no, the short answer is really you can't defy the state and not come up with a plan to how you're going to meet your housing.
Yes.
Yes.
The answer is yes. And in fact, in one area that I'm kind of close to in oh goodness, I'm going to forget the name of the city, but they were fighting it so badly that they disincorporated part of their area just to not have to have affordable housing. It's an incredibly bad thing for a jurisdiction because the legal fees really do start adding up, and more than anything else, it also prevents all other issues of permits. So like if you were building your home and wanted to redo something to it, nothing happens till that's resolved. But I want to make sure we understand here, this is not an oh my God moment where we need to, live in fear of this. There are a number of opportunities and options out there for dealing with the housing situation here in Yountville. You're not that far off, and there are a number of other opportunities that don't involve your property that you can consider. So you need to be open to those and think about, again, you may have to look at some of these second units. You may have to look at a second floor, and if that preserves other things, then you can do that. Yes, Pam? Yep.
I just have a question. I'm wondering why we are giving a pass to the French Laundry Garden property. That's an owner who has 6, now 7 businesses in town, and it feels like the town should be able to require worker housing on the last piece that's available for it.
Perfect example of something that Steve was talking about earlier, right? This is zoning, which means that right now there is an overlay on that for housing, and if they chose to build something, they'd have to take that into consideration. But as long as they are not building something, you can't force them any more than we could take his property. I'm not saying we're going to, but if we zoned it, we couldn't say, and you must build housing. You must do that now. That's not how it works. It's what the property owner chooses to do based on the existing zoning. You cannot force a property owner to build something they do not want to build, but you can prevent them from building something that is not zoned.
Then I don't see the reason why it's important to rezone the north property any more than.
It's the screwiest thing from the state because
than
they
what's
don't
already-
mandate that the town of Yountville or any other town in California actually build the housing. They mandate that the zoning is there in case a developer would come in and build it. And it's a very difficult concept because we work in a lot of communities where people say, we really want affordable housing, please build us some condos, please, please, please. Why isn't the city doing that? The town and the city are not builders. They're simply allocating land so that if another person comes in or an entity comes in, that they could build it. So I know it's weird, but that's the way the law is written. Yeah, Mr. Knight, wait, I'm gonna go back here first. Come to you in a moment.
I have a question related to the North Ag parcel. But I think what I'm hearing from everyone here is that they hope that the family, the Palissas, the Harrises, the Hoxies farm this land forever, for more than 100, forever. But my question is specifically about the parcel. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Ag Preserve, but this parcel is not in the county. So it's within the city limits of the town of Yountville, so it's not protected by the Ag Preserve. It's not protected by a winery, the county winery ordinance. So the question I have is in the town since the early history is zoned to agriculture, because that's just the way the property came into the parcel. What could happen to that parcel if the community just let it be agriculture? What uses could be developed without the council approving a project change or something?
Sure, Sandra.
Could a large winery and event center be developed? And that's my question.
That's Sandra.
So there are uses that are permitted on the property that you don't need a permit for, and that's obviously the vineyard. You could also do a home on the property and a second dwelling on the property. When you're looking at intensifying the use for a winery or having retail sales out of a winery, that would require town council approval. And we would look at the town's floor area ratio requirements, and that's how much of a winery or how big a winery you could build on the property, but those are options. Farm worker housing is another option that could be put on the property. And the zoning ordinance has a handful of items. I haven't listed all of them. Those are sort of representative samples of what could be built. But there is development that is possible. Under the current zoning, the town's zoning is agricultural. There are structures that could be built. And you're correct, it's not subject to the protections of the Napa County Ag Preserve because it's not in unincorporated Napa County, but within the town limits. And it's also not subject to the county's rules on what you can and can't do at a winery, such as holding events or weddings or things of that nature. The town's rules are different from the county's rules. Other questions?
Okay, you have one more and then we'll go ahead and pull on that.
I think as you folks go through this zoning with respect to the North Ag parcel, and I come from a farming family, not a big one, but we're a farming family, and that farmers are vineyard people. You know, you're equity rich and dollar poor because everything you make goes back into what you've got so that you can stay current with the requirements of farming, and you would be amazed at the requirements that are mandated by the state and the federal government for farming. And that to zone this residential, and then when it goes into an estate and it gets appraised, becomes a bigger value than it's really worth under its for highest and best use, that you're forcing these people that have a livelihood and have a hard attachment to the terra are forced to part with something that is part of their heritage. I think you really, really need to take a big, hard look inside yourselves before you start rezoning something that has implications down the road that nobody can fix except dollars.
All right, let's take a moment and take a look at this particular thing, because I want to give everybody an opportunity to weigh in on that again. For this parcel, the options are: 1, redesignate the 6 acres for housing; 2, wait until we absolutely need it; or 3, what I've heard a couple times tonight, leave it the hell alone. So these are your 3 options: 1, 2, or 3, and then we've got one more property that I don't think is going to be quite as controversial. So let's weigh in on this, because we have a couple more things to go through. So for the North Egg parcel, everybody seems to be in on that. Okay. So for the room tonight, we would like to leave that property alone at the moment. And okay, I want to go one more section here. This is about the Vista condominiums, and we're going to go through that and then talk a little bit about the next steps moving forward. But Christine, you want to take us through that?
Okay. All right. This is the last topic of the evening, Vista condominiums. Another thing that we did talk about at the November workshop, and what we were talking about is, should Vista condominiums, they're all 1 story, and we've had some interest from some of the property owners to go to 2 stories, some requests. And so the question, what we had looked at, was the possibility of allowing Vista condominiums to go to 2 stories. And at the time, we actually had the majority of people that came to that meeting were in support of going to 2 stories. We also talked about it at the town advisory group, at the zoning and design review board, and we had a little wrinkle. So we wanted to bring it back to you and for a little refinement of the direction here. This is the result that we had gotten. So as you can see, the majority of people said yes. And so here's an aerial of looking at Vista condominiums, all the red roofs there. And what the proposal was is that perhaps we should just allow the condominiums that are in the interior ring to go to 2 stories, and not the ones on the exterior rings, in order to kind of preserve the views of the vineyards, and also because those other existing homes that are adjacent to Vista condominiums are now, they're kind of used to those homes being 1 story. So the question really is should we allow the Vista condominiums, to all of them, to go to 2 stories, which is what we had support for, or should we think about just allowing the ones on the interior ring to go to 2 stories?
And
that's
here's
a pretty simple question, but
here's
we have questions
the
about
simple
it.
question. Yes. Okay. Yes, right here.
What aspects of the 2023 housing elements would this help?
This doesn't help the housing element, because we're not talking about having more units. We're just talking about allowing the existing units to have a little bit more space.
So one of the reasons people consider this is, let's say you've bought in, and rather than buying a new home to expand your family, sometimes they'll find that it's cheaper to do a remodel and get that extra bedroom rather than trying to find a 3-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house in the community. So it addresses some affordability.
That said, I want to make one little caveat. If the homeowner wanted to have this extra space in order to make a 2nd unit, that 2nd unit would be counted as an additional housing unit. So yes, it could actually help out the housing numbers. At the discretion of the homeowner, exactly.
All right, any other questions on this one? Yes, Pam? Wait.
Pardon me?
Would they build it as an entirely separate unit?
Can they build a 2nd unit there now, since they're condominiums?
Like, you're talking about like a granny flat, like a...
I should have asked.
So currently there is no restriction on 2nd floor ADUs or additional dwelling units, so yes.
I just had a question. That I understand about the interior ring check marks, but something that wouldn't disturb the views of all the surrounding residents is if the condos on the Fennell Road side were also included in that, and that would give more opportunity for additional room and 2nd units if necessary.
Okay, so for purposes of tonight, because I think I understand that we're trying to find a combination that basically preserves some view corridors. So the question is, with that particular unit, would you support a second story for the Vista condominiums? 1, yes, 2, yes, but only on the interior, or to your point, a section of them. 3, no, or 4, you are unsure. 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then we've got easy questions. There's 4 really easy ones. Okay, here we go. Unsure, yes, yes, but only on the interior, and no. Okay.
All right. Since we've had such a robust discussion tonight, I just wanted to share some thoughts on why this was so important that we went through that very painful discussion, and it was painful. We received a lot of valuable information. And the reason it is important is that we heard community support for working with the Veterans Home and encouraging them to partner with private developers. That's important because we can have policies in our general plan that really show the town's support. Strong policies may put us in a position for the state to accept that to meet our housing goals and our housing obligations in the next cycle, when typically state-owned land wouldn't support that. So the strong support and the direction in the general plan as the Veterans Home is very important. We got that tonight. Oh, I had a second point too. Oh, the second point is that our next housing element is due in 2023. That means in 3 or 4 years we're going to start drafting that. We have the answers here tonight on how we want to move forward with some of those options. We don't have to open up the North Agricultural Parcel then. We got the answer and the feedback tonight, and that's really, really valuable. So thanks for going through that effort. It was good.
It was good. It's very good. Well, we enjoyed it. I know that. I'm going to ask you 4 questions. These are really quick and easy. You're going to hopefully know the answers to these. How long have you lived in Yountville? Pretty simple. 1, less than a year. 2, 1 to 5. We ask these questions, by the way, because in all the various outreach we do, we want to make sure that we're getting a good cross-section of folks. So please answer this question as quickly as possible. And if you don't live here, you don't have to click in on that one at all. Okay, there's that one. And look at that, nice little, I love people who've been here for more than 20 years, it's so awesome. This is a pretty simple one too, because we're in Yountville. Are you male or female? Okay. You may get a chuckle, but I do have to have more choices some places, so okay. All right, here we go. All right, wow. I love this one because people always try to lie and throw me off. How old are you? I'm just saying, if I see under 18, somebody's lying. But we would encourage that, and of course, if you have kids at home that want to participate, all this is going to be available online, so other folks, we do want to see them out there and throwing their 2 cents in. And everybody's in on that one. This is kind of reflective of some of the challenges we have in the community. And then the last one, how did you like the meeting? I'll let you to your own devices on that one. But again, I think as we said, we really appreciate the input. And the whole point is when you have people that are participating, then you get a better plan, because you can't have a good plan without the community telling you what they think. And that's valuable. Okay. Now, where are we? General plan timeline. Okay, well, here tonight we're at the community workshop, which is the 26th. The team's going to continue working with the technical advisory group and then also get input from the various boards and council, so that all this input that we've heard tonight, we're going to be putting this all in a big document and then sharing that. That means we're going to be sharing all the comments that we received and making sure that people know what the feedback we received was all about. And then from that, Christine and her team will be drafting the general plan. Following that draft general plan, we will have our next community meeting, which will be August 18th, and that will be more like an open house. So you'll see in this room different stations set up with information about the general plan, the various elements, what kind of things are proposed, and you'll get an opportunity to tell us, you know, did we get it right, did we get it wrong, what needs to change, and again, that will go in contact with the draft environmental impact report, and then of course go forward for board and council review until we have an adopted general plan, which I believe will be sometime at the end of this year. Now, that plan we hope will have a long and happy life here in Yountville, and we hope that it will serve the community and reflect the community values. Again, I want to thank all of you for participating tonight. We have comment cards there. We have the envisionyountville.com website. You can send us comments. Everything you've seen tonight, as well as all of the drawings and the survey, will be available online within a couple of days. So you will be able to share this information with family, friends, colleagues, neighbors, other people. We'll be keeping that open for quite some time. So again, thank you to all of you who came tonight. Does anyone have anything, any last comment you want to make sure that we have before we leave? Yes. Where did Curtis go? Oh.
I wanted to thank all of you. Great job. You deserve respect. You got it. This is a great presentation. I learned a lot. Good job to everybody. Thank you.